Hört man mich jetzt? Hallo zusammen. Oh. Ich bin Marlene Straub, ich bin Redakteurin beim Verfassungsblog und moderiere heute diese Bühne. Das ist eine bilinguale Bühne und ich wechsle gleich ins Englische. Damjan und Scheimer wissen schon, dass ich jetzt erstmal auf Deutsch ein bisschen die Logistik kläre. Wir hören jetzt 2 Lightning Talks von Damjan und von Scheimer. Das sind keine Talks, auf die danach eine Diskussion folgen kann. Das ist alleine dazu da, bei euch Ideen anzuregen und Gedanken zu stiften. Und im Anschluss an diese Lightning Talks haben wir einen separaten Workshop und da ist explizit gefordert, dass wir uns austauschen und dass wir diskutieren. So I'll switch to English now. We had a bit of a logistical change. So initially Shaima was supposed to speak first, and we've now switched with Damjan going first. Damjan is going to talk to us about intersectional approaches to international cooperation. Damjan Denkovski is the Deputy Executive Director at the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy, where he leads the Universal Human Rights Program. His work circles around developing intersectional approaches to international cooperation. And I want to speak as little as possible and give the stage to Damjan.
We need to therefore shift from securitizing development and starting to look at security from a much more developmental perspective. The locally owned relevant interventions need to be developed with and for those who are best suited to deliver support and assistance to actually resolve root causes of problems. Conditionality, when given by donor governments, should be based on good governance and not building stable partnerships with corrupt regimes. The feminist research shows for years that the higher the level of gender equality within a country, the more peaceful that state is internally and externally. States with a higher level of gender equality are more likely to respect international norms and have better relationships with their neighboring countries. To put it simply, we at CFFP argue that science says that without feminism, there will be no international peace and security. Yet, despite all of this evidence, and now more than 20 years after the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, now known as the WPS agenda, women and other political minorities are still largely excluded from foreign and security processes. Their expertise is ignored and their needs are overlooked, where others make policies for them without involving them. In far too many cases, all of these policies are reproducing discriminatory and patriarchal structures across the world instead of actively countering them. A feminist foreign policy, and by extension, a feminist approach to development cooperation, have the potential of changing this. So a feminist approach to development cooperation, more concretely, would prioritize intersectional, so looking at income, gender, racial, and all other forms of equality and justice, over focusing on poverty reduction measured through nationwide economic indicators such as GDP, as eradicating the root causes of poverty. So a feminist approach to development cooperation will acknowledge that development aid itself, the way it's conceptualized, is a colonial structure and will then actively need to work towards decolonizing this policy area. The BMZ in its 2030 agenda has rhetorically adjusted its terminology from development aid to development cooperation. And the intention was to establish a new relationship between Germany and recipient countries who are officially regarded as equal partners in the ministry's view, based on a principle of joint development of cooperation goals, measures, and then share responsibility for success or failure. But at the same time, civil society from target countries is not actively or sufficiently meaningfully involved in the development and assessment of these policies. Often cooperation happens between governments at the governmental high level, which again leads us to the issue of sometimes dealing with regimes that do not actually put first the equality or dignity of all of their citizens. While in the LGBTQI inclusion strategy of the German Foreign Office and then the BMZ, the relevant aspects of missionary and colonial history are considered essential considerations, the German government still has not publicly stated that it recognizes that development cooperation overall continues to be influenced by colonial thinking and knowledge production. It also has not fundamentally acknowledged the inherent power inequalities between Germany and the so-called partner countries. So it almost seems that financial support is seen as a voluntary relief campaign and diminishing the responsibility of Germany, but also all other European countries as former colonial powers. Moreover, these cooperation goals, like I said, are not being considered with civil society in mind in Germany or outside, and this can replicate asymmetrical relationships. So in order to fully enact the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and in order to make it intersectional and feminist, the leaving no one behind principle needs to truly be the core and the basis of all government policies. Resources need to be invested in developing a coherent interministerial implementation plan that will pool all the various initiatives and commitments in both foreign and development policies, because we cannot see them as separate policy fields. And we cannot have instruments on the one hand that aim to reduce inequality or poverty, and instruments on the other hand that push for militarized solutions to problems. Analyzing all of these initiatives from the perspective of ensuring the improvement of people's lived experiences, rather than focusing on institutional change in partner countries only, will go a long way towards making development cooperation more intersectional and more feminist. And turning back to why sort of looking at the human security dimension and looking at justice, intersectional justice at all levels is relevant. Our work and our research on anti-feminist and anti-gender ideologies and the basis that they have in the hostility and hatred towards women and LGBTQI people have long been overlooked in analyzing radicalization and the drive to violence and violent extremism, both in Europe and in other regions of the world. Both of these ideologies very strongly appeal to groups organized around exclusionary principles, because they provide the language and the framework for defending hierarchies within society. And it is these hierarchies which then promote and support the fundamental inequalities and social exclusion, which leads to a decrease in human security, which is a much better predictor of instability. And like I said before, also that countries that have gender equality, or countries where gender equality is closer to being achieved, are inherently more peaceful inside and outside. So despite all of the striking prevalence of anti-feminism and anti-gender attitudes within extremist worldviews, these motives have been considered at best secondary when analyzing these issues. So in order to enact a feminist approach to foreign policy and development policy, we need to fully recognize the transformative approach of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and the need to focus on conflict prevention while rolling back the escalating levels of militarized responses. So we need active civilian peace building and less militarized responses. We need we need to actively commit to countering anti-gender, misogynistic and right-wing violence inside our own countries and outside in the foreign and development policy spaces. But for now, we continue to see the issues of sexism and anti-feminism as apolitical rather than ideological, and therefore miss the points of them being warning signs towards ideologically motivated violence. So I would wrap up with this and just kind of point to the need to look at holistically again human security as the root causes of instability, or human insecurity as the root cause of instability, and that foreign and development and all other policy instruments at the disposal of a state need to take into account the lived experiences of the people that they are targeting in order to effectively respond to crises. Otherwise, we will always be perpetuating the same power asymmetries and inequalities. Thank you once again for having me here, and I wish you an excellent discussion.
Thank you, Damjan. I'm just realizing that potentially 15-minute lightning talks are not enough time to actually make the points you want to make, and I'm very sorry that I have to prevent people from asking you any questions. But maybe you can share your social media or your email address or some way people can communicate with you if they have questions.
Sure. So it's my email address is my name as spelled on, wait, wrong side, on this side. So damjan at centerforffp.org or cffp.org. I look forward to any contacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.